It was an ordinary day on Earth, or so it seemed. The sun rose just like it always did, casting its warm light over the cities, the fields, and the bustling streets. People went about their day, oblivious to the fact that something incredible was about to happen. High above in the sky, an event was unfolding that would forever change the fate of the planet. Out in the vastness of space, a ship, the size of a small mountain, hurtled toward Earth. Its sleek metallic surface glinted as it cut through the atmosphere, emitting a trail of fiery sparks. The ship was not like anything anyone had seen before. It had no wings, no engines that could be seen, and no markings to indicate its origin. It was simply a massive, strange object, like an enigma falling from the stars. People first noticed the object as a bright streak across the sky. A comet, they thought. But within moments, it became clear this was no comet. The streak of light grew larger and larger, and it seemed to be falling fast. Panic spread quickly. Some people thought it was an asteroid, a disaster waiting to happen. Others thought it might be a spaceship, but no one could say for sure. News outlets scrambled to report the event, but no one had an explanation. In the small town of Oakwood, a mechanic named Tom Edwards was finishing up his shift at a local garage. He had always been good with his hands, fixing cars, engines, and machines of all kinds. That was his world. It was simple, it was safe, and it was predictable. But this was not something Tom was prepared for. As he worked under the hood of a car, he looked up at the sky, his tools in hand. He had never seen a shooting star like this before, and it didn't take him long to realize that this wasn't a star at all. This was something far more dangerous. He dropped the wrench and dashed outside to get a better look. Tom wasn't alone. People were beginning to gather outside, all staring at the object now slowly descending toward Earth. The ship was enormous, larger than any building Tom had ever seen. It came in at an angle, falling lower and lower until it finally crashed into the fields just outside the town, sending up a cloud of dust and debris that could be seen for miles. The ground trembled under the force of the crash. Windows in nearby houses rattled, and the earth seemed to groan in response to the impact. It was a sound Tom would never forget, a deep, rumbling noise that shook him to his core. Tom didn't hesitate. Despite the shock and fear coursing through him, he felt a strange pull, an unexplainable desire to see what had landed. He jumped into his truck and drove toward the crash site, his mind racing. What was it? Who had sent it? Was it a message? Or something far more dangerous? When he arrived at the edge of the field, he wasn't the only one there. The military had already arrived, securing the area and setting up a perimeter. There were helicopters overhead, and soldiers were moving swiftly, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Tom watched from a distance, trying to make sense of the scene. The ship was still smoking from the impact, its once sleek surface now blackened and scorched. It looked like it had been through hell, burnt, battered, and broken. But as Tom stared at it, he noticed something strange. There was a faint glow coming from within the ship, a pulsing light that seemed to call to him. Before he could step forward, a soldier approached him. "Stay back," the man ordered. "It's not safe." Tom nodded, his heart racing, but his curiosity wouldn't let him walk away. Something deep inside him urged him to get closer. A loud clang echoed from the wreckage, and Tom froze. The glow grew brighter. There was movement inside the ship. The hull groaned, as if something inside was pushing against it. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure why, but he knew he had to be there when whatever it was came out. And that's when it happened. The side of the ship began to open, slowly at first, and then with a deafening screech. Inside, Tom could see a figure, tall, powerful, and made of materials he couldn't identify. It was a guardian. The alien figure emerged from the wreckage, its movements slow but deliberate. It was covered in strange armor, glistening with an iridescent sheen. Its face, if it could be called a face, was hidden behind a helmet of sorts, but the aura of power that surrounded it was unmistakable. It was a being like no other, part machine, part living entity, and completely foreign to anything Tom had ever seen. Its voice was like nothing he had ever heard before. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't even a language. It was more of a feeling, a vibration in the air that resonated deep within his chest. "You are the one," the Guardian said, its voice reverberating through Tom's body, as if the words were written directly into his mind. Tom stared at the alien, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" he whispered, unsure if the Guardian could even hear him. The alien's eyes gleamed as it slowly nodded. It stepped back, taking its hand away, and the hum of energy in the air seemed to die down, leaving Tom feeling as though the whole world had just shifted beneath him. The moment of silence that followed was heavy. Tom wasn't sure what had just happened, but deep down he knew. He had been chosen. The alien had chosen him for something that went beyond human comprehension. The soldiers stepped forward, their commanding officer shouting for everyone to fall back. But Tom couldn't move. He didn't want to move. He couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was the beginning of something far greater. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He had just taken the first step into a galaxy far beyond anything he had ever known. The Guardian turned toward the horizon, its gaze lingering on the distant stars. Then, without another word, it began to move. And Tom, now forever connected to the alien Guardian, followed. The moment Tom stepped forward, following the Guardian, everything around him felt different. The air had an almost electric quality to it, crackling with unseen energy. He could feel it deep within his chest, this strange bond that now connected him to the alien warrior. It wasn't just a physical touch anymore. It was something far greater, something that intertwined their very beings. The soldiers had begun to move too, their weapons still drawn, but now with hesitation in their steps. Tom could see the confusion in their eyes, the uncertainty about what had just transpired. He could feel their eyes on him, judging him, wondering why he was not running. Wasn't this supposed to be a moment of fear? Didn't they all understand the gravity of the situation? But none of that mattered to him now. His mind raced with thoughts, his body filled with an odd sense of calm. There was no fear, no panic, only a deep, unexplainable certainty. He wasn't the same person who had fixed the Guardian's armor hours ago. That mechanic was gone, replaced by something, or someone, else entirely. Someone who was now part of something far larger than his small corner of Earth. The Guardian turned its head toward him, its glowing eyes meeting his once again. There was no mistaking it. The alien was aware of him in a way that Tom could never truly comprehend. The connection between them wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, even mental. It was as if the Guardian could feel every thought that raced through Tom's mind, every emotion, every doubt. In return, Tom could feel the weight of the alien's history, the countless millennia of guardianship, and the cosmic knowledge locked away in the depths of its being. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was strangely comforting. They walked for what felt like hours, but when Tom looked around, he realized they hadn't moved far at all. The world seemed to blur around them, a shifting haze that made it difficult to focus on anything but the being before him. His mind was constantly drawn to the Guardian's presence, its stoic strength, its otherworldly grace. It wasn't just walking beside him. It was guiding him, leading him through the storm of questions and emotions that were flooding his mind. As they reached the edge of the clearing, Tom's senses seemed to sharpen. He could hear the soft rustling of leaves, the distant hum of machinery, the faint sounds of a world that felt so familiar and yet, at the same time, so far away. The sounds of Earth, his home, felt so small, so insignificant compared to the vastness of the universe that now seemed to be stretching before him. The Guardian stopped abruptly, its head turning sharply toward a massive structure hidden beneath the trees. It was a ship, an enormous vessel unlike anything Tom had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, like liquid metal reflecting the light of the distant sun. The craft was ancient, yet it exuded a strange, timeless power, as if it had been waiting for something, or someone, to awaken it. Tom couldn't help but stare. His heart began to race again, this time not out of fear, but awe. The structure before him was beyond anything he could have imagined, its technology light years ahead of Earth's best designs. But it wasn't just the technology that struck him. It was the feeling of ancient power that emanated from it. He could almost sense the pulse of life deep within its core. The Guardian stepped forward, its gaze fixed on the ship, and Tom, almost without thinking, followed. He knew this was no ordinary place, no ordinary mission. There was a reason why he had been brought here, a reason why he had been chosen. And whatever that reason was, he was ready to discover it. They'd reached the ship, and Tom's breath caught in his throat. The surface of the craft seemed to respond to the Guardian's presence, shifting slightly, almost as if it were alive. The air around them grew heavier, and a low hum resonated from the ship, sending vibrations through the ground beneath their feet. Without a word, the Guardian raised its hand, and a small panel on the ship's hull slid open with a soft hiss. The ship's interior glowed with an eerie, soft light, casting long shadows on the ground outside. Tom looked at the Guardian, his mind racing. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The Guardian's eyes met his once again, and in that instant, Tom felt a deep connection to the being. As if the Guardian had heard his question, it stepped forward, gesturing for him to follow. "This ship is the key," the Guardian said, its voice reverberating in Tom's mind. "It is not only the ship that you must repair, it is the key to the universe's survival. And you are the one who will unlock its power." Tom's heart pounded. The weight of the words settled over him like a heavy cloak. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of something far greater, something that could change the fate of the universe. As he stepped inside the alien vessel, the world outside seemed to fade away. He was no longer just a man from Earth. He was the chosen one, bound to an ancient Guardian, tasked with the impossible. The ship's interior seemed to pulse with energy, its walls alive with intricate symbols and glowing lights. It was a living, breathing entity in its own right. Tom's journey was only just beginning. Tom stepped inside the ship, the heavy doors sliding shut behind him with an almost imperceptible hiss. The interior was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was a vast, circular chamber, its walls lined with shifting patterns of light and dark, like stars flickering in the sky. The air smelled faintly of metal and something organic, a strange mix that made Tom's skin tingle. His every movement seemed to echo in the silence, as if the ship itself was listening, waiting. The Guardian had already moved to the center of the room, its imposing figure still as ever, radiating a sense of calm authority. Tom hesitated for a moment before following, his feet crunching softly on the metallic floor. He couldn't quite grasp what was happening. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together, but he was still overwhelmed by the enormity of it all. As he drew closer to the Guardian, something began to happen. The ship's lights flickered, dimming before brightening again, and a low hum vibrated through the walls. Tom could feel the ship reacting to his presence, almost as if it recognized him. The Guardian turned its head toward him, its glowing eyes burning with intensity. "You have been chosen, human, not by chance, but by fate," it said, its voice vibrating in Tom's chest, like a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Tom swallowed hard, his throat dry. Chosen for what? His voice sounded small in the vast chamber, but the question burned within him. The Guardian didn't answer immediately. It simply extended its arm, pointing toward the center of the room. Tom followed its gaze and saw a strange pulsing device embedded into the floor, a glowing orb surrounded by intricate carvings and symbols. It seemed to hum with energy, a force that was both comforting and intimidating at once. The energy inside the orb was like a living thing, flowing and shifting, as if it had a mind of its own. "This ship," the Guardian continued, "is no ordinary vessel. It is an ancient relic, one that holds the key to the balance of the universe. But its power can only be unlocked by one who understands its true purpose. And you, human, are that key. Tom blinked, confused. He had no idea what the Guardian meant by the key, or how he could possibly be the one to unlock this power. But as his gaze returned to the orb, something stirred deep inside him, something that made his heart beat faster. A sharp, sudden realization struck him. This wasn't just about fixing a broken machine. This was about something much bigger, something cosmic, far beyond the mechanics of this alien technology. He had a part to play in a story much larger than himself. The ship seemed to respond to his thoughts. The hum grew louder, and the orb in the center of the room began to pulse with greater intensity. The symbols around it glowed brighter, casting long shadows on the walls. "Touch it," the Guardian's voice commanded, though there was no urgency in its tone, just a steady confidence. "Only when you do will you understand your role." Tom hesitated. Everything within him screamed to run, to step back, to not touch whatever this thing was. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the pull, the strange connection that was drawing him toward it. Something inside him knew that this was the moment. This was what he had been waiting for, even if he hadn't realized it yet. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. The air seemed to thicken with every step he took, as if the ship itself was watching, anticipating. When he reached the orb, he paused, staring at it. The carvings around it seemed to shift, their patterns rearranging, almost as if they were trying to tell him something. Slowly, cautiously, he extended his hand toward the orb. As his fingers brushed against its surface, a shock of energy surged through him. It was not painful, but it was overwhelming. A flood of images, feelings, and sensations rushed through his mind. He saw stars being born and dying in the far reaches of space, massive battles fought between ancient civilizations, and a galaxy in constant flux, teetering on the edge of destruction. He saw the ship, once a weapon of immense power, hidden away by its creators, waiting for a time when the universe would need it most. But through all these images, one thing stood out above all else: the Guardian. The ship and the Guardian were bound together, part of a larger, unbroken chain of events, stretching across time and space. And at the center of it all was a human, Tom. The connection between them was more than fate. It was a plan, a purpose, one that had been set in motion long before he had ever repaired a broken machine. The energy from the orb flooded into his body, filling him with knowledge and power. He could feel it. Deep within himself, something unlocking. His senses sharpened, his mind expanded, understanding things he never thought possible. He could feel the weight of the universe on his shoulders, but also the immense strength that now coursed through his veins. He could hear the ship's systems coming online. A low rumble echoed through the walls, as if the vessel itself was waking up after millennia of slumber. The guardians of the past had laid dormant, waiting for the right moment. And now, it seemed, that moment had come. Tom's heart raced. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just a man from Earth trying to survive. He was the chosen one, the one who would lead the fight, the one who would wield the power of this ancient ship, and perhaps change the fate of the universe forever. But with that knowledge came responsibility, an enormous, terrifying weight. Tom turned to the Guardian, whose glowing eyes watched him with a quiet understanding. The ship was no longer just a machine. It was alive, a part of him. And now, more than ever, he understood. The universe was in peril, and it was up to him to stop it. "Now, the real journey begins," he whispered, his voice trembling. The power within him thrummed louder, and the ship hummed in response, ready to follow his command. As Tom prepared to face whatever challenges awaited, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer the man he had been when he first stepped into the ship. He had changed, and with that change, the universe itself would never be the same. Tom stood at the center of the ship, his heart still racing from the flood of energy he had just experienced. The power, knowledge, and understanding he had gained from touching the orb had irrevocably changed him. No longer just a human mechanic, he now carried the weight of an entire galaxy on his shoulders. He could sense it now, the subtle hum of the ship resonating deep within him. It was as if it was alive, responding to his thoughts, to his very will. Beside him, the Guardian watched quietly, its glowing eyes never leaving him. The stillness of the room was palpable, the only sound the soft pulse of the ship's systems coming back online. But despite the calm exterior, Tom could feel something more, something far more sinister brewing just beyond the edge of his awareness. A sudden beeping from the ship's console broke the silence. It was low at first, barely audible, but it quickly grew in urgency. Tom's instincts kicked in, and he moved toward the console, his hands finding the touch interface. The ship's holographic screen flickered to life in front of him, displaying a star map filled with countless points of light. But there was one area that stood out, a small sector at the far reaches of the galaxy, marked with a bold red warning. "Guardian," Tom said, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. "What's happening in that sector?" The Guardian's voice, calm and measured as always, responded. "That sector is home to a growing threat, a faction of the ancient enemies of the galaxy, the Drax. They have been slowly gathering strength for centuries, lying in wait. Their time has come." Tom frowned. He had heard of the Drax before. Ancient and ruthless, the Drax had once nearly destroyed the galaxy in their pursuit of power. Their empire had crumbled long ago, but the rumors of their return had never fully faded. Now it seemed those rumors were true. The holographic map zoomed in on the sector, revealing a massive fleet of ships gathered around a black hole. The ships, dark and menacing, were unlike anything Tom had ever seen. The ships' designs were intricate and otherworldly, their shapes both elegant and terrifying. They were powerful, and there were many of them, far more than Tom had ever imagined. "This is bad," he muttered under his breath. "Indeed," the Guardian replied. "The Drax are an ancient race, and they seek to control the very fabric of the universe. They believe that by harnessing the power of the black hole, they can rewrite the laws of time and space itself. The galaxy is in danger, and you, human, are the one who must stop them." Tom felt the gravity of those words hit him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just repairing ships and fixing engines. He had become the linchpin in a battle that would decide the fate of the universe. He could already feel the pulse of the ship, the hum of its systems now fully integrated with his own senses. It was waiting for him, trusting him to lead it, to command it. The Drax fleet was readying itself for something big. Tom could feel it. The very air around him seemed to vibrate with anticipation. "Are we ready to move?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We are," the Guardian replied, "but we must act quickly. The Drax are already beginning their plan. If they succeed in tapping into the black hole's power, it will be too late." Tom's hands moved instinctively, his fingers gliding over the controls as the ship's systems came alive. The once dormant vessel now hummed with a force that seemed to echo across the galaxy. This ship, his ship now, was ready for battle. The stars outside the ship's window shifted as the engines roared to life. The ship surged forward, breaking free of the gravitational pull of the planet, where it had once lay dormant. Tom's grip tightened on the controls, his pulse quickening as they entered warp speed, streaking across space toward the danger that awaited them. As they approached the Drax fleet, Tom's thoughts raced. He knew this would be no easy fight. The Drax were ruthless, and their power was unmatched. But now, armed with the ship's ancient power and the knowledge he had gained, he felt a growing sense of resolve. The stars blurred around them as the ship accelerated toward the battlefield. Tom could feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like his destiny. The ship's engines thrummed in unison with his heartbeat, and he realized that he wasn't alone in this fight. The ship was with him. The Guardian was with him. And somewhere deep within, he knew he wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was fighting for the survival of everything. Ahead of them, the Drax fleet loomed like a shadow in the distance, dark and foreboding, waiting to unleash its fury. But Tom didn't flinch. He had a purpose now, and with that purpose came power. And he would see this through to the end. The massive Drax fleet was just ahead, its ships like dark shadows against the vast canvas of space. The black hole, a swirling mass of impossible gravity and light, loomed ominously in the distance. Tom could feel the pull of its immense power even from here, as if it was calling out to him, beckoning him to come closer. The thought sent a chill down his spine, but he pushed it aside. This was not a time for fear. "We're almost there," Tom muttered under his breath, gripping the controls tighter. The ship's cockpit was alive with flashing lights and the steady hum of the engine as they accelerated toward the Drax fleet. The Guardian stood beside him, silent but ever watchful, its presence a reminder of the power now at his fingertips. "We must strike first," the Guardian's voice echoed in his mind. "If they complete their ritual, they will gain the ability to manipulate time and space. That power will be beyond even our comprehension." Tom nodded. His heart beat loudly in his chest, but his mind was calm. He had no choice but to face them, to stop the Drax before they could use the black hole's power to reshape reality itself. There was no time for second-guessing. The Drax fleet began to shift as they neared. Massive warships, armed with weapons beyond anything Tom had ever seen, began to line up in formation. The ships were sleek and menacing, their jagged designs a testament to the brutal race that had crafted them. The air inside the cockpit seemed to grow thick with tension. The Drax had already begun their ritual. They were trying to tap into the black hole's power. But Tom wasn't about to let them succeed. "Prepare to engage," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise of the ship's systems. His fingers danced across the controls, activating the weapon systems. The ship responded instantly, its cannons charging with energy, ready to unleash destruction. The Guardian's voice rang out in his mind again. "Remember, human, you are not just a mechanic. You are the one chosen to command this ship. Trust in it, and it will trust in you." Tom felt the truth of those words settle in his bones. He was more than just a man now. He was the ship's commander, its pilot, and its protector. The ship was no longer just a machine. It was a partner, an extension of his will. And together, they would face the Drax. The first salvo of energy bolts from the Drax fleet erupted toward them, streaking through the void at incredible speeds. Tom's hand shot out, twisting the controls with lightning speed. The ship swerved to the side, narrowly avoiding the barrage of fire. It was fast, faster than he had ever thought possible. The ship's systems seemed to move in sync with his thoughts, reacting as though they were a part of him. "Engage countermeasures," Tom barked. Without missing a beat, the ship unleashed a series of dazzling energy pulses, scattering the incoming fire and blinding the enemy ships with brilliant flashes of light. The Drax ships recoiled, temporarily disoriented, but quickly regrouped, launching another wave of attacks. The battle had begun. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he focused on the controls, weaving the ship through the chaos of laser fire and explosions. The Drax fleet was vast, but they were slow compared to the agility of his ship. He could hear the ship's hum, feel the power coursing through it. Each twist and turn was seamless, as if the ship anticipated his every move. A massive Drax warship loomed ahead, its engines glowing like a pair of red eyes. Tom didn't hesitate. He activated the main weapon, and a powerful beam of energy shot from the ship's forward cannons, cutting through the enemy ship's shields and slamming into its hull. The Drax ship shuddered and exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Direct hit," Tom said, his voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. But there was no time to celebrate. The battle was far from over. Another wave of Drax ships surged forward, their weapons charging once again. Tom's eyes narrowed as he analyzed their movements. He could sense the rhythm of their attacks now. He could predict their next move before they made it. It was almost like a dance, a deadly ballet in the vacuum of space. And he knew the steps. "Guardian," Tom said, his focus unwavering. "Prepare the ship for the next phase. We need to take out their command ship." The Guardian's voice echoed in his mind. "Understood. Proceed with caution. The Dracs are cunning. Do not underestimate them." Tom nodded, his jaw clenched. He had no intention of underestimating the Dracs. They were an ancient, ruthless race, and they would not go down easily. But neither would he. The Dracs' command ship, a colossal structure larger than anything Tom had ever seen, loomed in the distance. It was heavily armored, with massive weapons systems that dwarfed even the other ships in the fleet. But Tom wasn't afraid. The ship responded to his commands with precision, navigating through the storm of enemy fire as he closed the distance. "We're almost there," Tom muttered to himself. He could feel the tension in his body as they neared the enemy flagship. The Dracs were preparing for one final assault, but they had no idea what they were up against. With a roar, Tom pushed the ship to its limits. They were closing in now, the final strike just moments away. The battle for the galaxy was on the line, and he wasn't going to let the Dracs win. The distance between Tom's ship and the Dracs' command ship shrank rapidly, the air inside the cockpit thick with tension. Every movement, every decision was crucial now. The Dracs' fleet had regrouped, their ships swarming like a deadly swarm of bees around their queen. But Tom had one advantage they didn't: the ship. The powerful, agile vessel he now commanded wasn't just a machine. It was an extension of his will, as though they were one. "Prepare for impact," Tom said, his voice calm but steady. His hands danced over the controls, activating the final stage of the ship's weapon systems. The weapon array hummed to life, a low but steady vibration that shook the cockpit. The ship's entire body seemed to pulse with energy, ready for the final push. The Guardian stood silent by his side, watching through the viewports with its glowing eyes. Tom could feel its presence, its energy, as though it was a part of him. There was no more hesitation now. There was only the mission. "Focus, human," the Guardian's voice spoke in his mind. "The Dracs are more than mere invaders. They are a force of nature, relentless and ruthless. But they have never faced what we can do together. Trust in the ship, trust in yourself." Tom's pulse quickened as he took a deep breath. He was ready. He had to be. The Dracs' command ship loomed ahead, its massive silhouette a menacing shadow against the black void of space. The ship was covered in thick armor, its weapon systems bristling with deadly power. It was larger than any vessel he had ever seen, dwarfing even the largest of the ships in the fleet. But Tom wasn't intimidated. He had come too far, fought too hard, to let fear take hold now. "Dracs, your reign ends here," he muttered to himself, gripping the controls with resolve. The Dracs' fleet fired once again, their weapons lighting up the darkness with deadly flashes of energy. The ship's shields flared as they took the brunt of the assault, but the ship held strong. Tom could feel the vibrations of the impact as the energy beams collided with the shield, but they didn't breach. The ship was holding steady, and he knew that if he could just get close enough, he would have the opportunity to strike. "Hold on," he called out to the ship, more to himself than to anyone else. With a burst of speed, Tom shot the ship forward, dodging enemy fire at the last moment. He knew he couldn't just stay on the defensive forever. He had to end this now. The enemy ships were fast, but Tom's ship was faster. With every twist of the controls, he guided the vessel through the oncoming barrage, its sleek hull gliding through the chaos. The Drac ships were relentless, but they were starting to falter. They couldn't keep up with the speed and precision of his attacks. Tom was too close now. The time to strike was upon him. He aimed for the weak spot in the Dracs' command ship's defenses, the exposed power core. With a calm breath, Tom activated the ship's main cannon, and a brilliant beam of concentrated energy shot forward, slicing through the Dracs' ship's shields with ease. The core was vulnerable, and he hit it directly. The explosion that followed was deafening, a flash of light so bright it could have rivaled the stars themselves. For a brief moment, everything stood still. The Drax fleet fell silent, their ships frozen in mid-motion. The black hole loomed in the distance, still pulling at the fabric of space. But in that moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Then the shockwave hit. The Drax command ship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, debris flying outward in all directions. The shockwave sent ripples through the remaining ships, causing them to lose control as the blast's energy swept through the battlefield. Tom's ship was jolted by the force, but it held firm, responding to his every command. "Did we do it?" Tom muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. The Guardian's voice came through, calm and reassuring. "Yes, human. The Drax fleet has been defeated. The galaxy is safe, for now." Tom exhaled deeply, finally allowing himself a moment to relax. The weight of the battle had been lifted, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The Drax were just one threat in a vast, unknown galaxy, and many more dangers lurked beyond the stars. But for now, humanity had won a significant victory. Tom looked out into the vastness of space, the stars stretching out in all directions. The galaxy was still there, waiting. And with the ship at his command, and the Guardian by his side, he knew they were ready for whatever came next. The final battle was over, but the journey had only just begun.